So here we have Chef Karan Gokani joining us here and beginning with the session. So a very small intro that I have prepared for you, beginning with that. So if you all ever have watched a bear, you know that running a restaurant isn't just about cooking. And it's about creativity, precision, and sometimes a bit of chaos. Now imagine bringing the bold and vibrant flavors of Sri Lanka and South India to London's dining scene. It takes a lot of vision and passion. Today we have someone who's done just that. Karan Gokani sir, co-founder and creative director of Hoppers, has redefined how people experience South Asian food in the UK. From a background in law to running one of the London's most celebrated restaurant brands, his journey is a masterclass in reinvention, resilience, and of course, great taste. So let's dig into the secret sauce behind his success.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Sir, I actually am from Bombay, so I was very delighted to know that you grew up here in Bombay itself. And you were very fond of Tamilian dishes prepared by your uncle. But beyond your Indian roots, you also studied law at Cambridge and later swapped a lawyer's briefcase for a chef's apron. What was the movement that flipped the switch from legal briefs to London feast, and how did it shape your journey?
Yeah, I think we could do a whole session on that question. Sort of long story short, I grew up in Bombay. Much like you, my heart is still very much there. It's one of those things. And once you grow up in a country, no matter how long you've been away, your roots are very strong. And now I've got family here in London, so I'm based in London. I came across to study law, as you said, but I think throughout that period, so I did actually 2 law degrees. One was in Bombay and then the second one was here in the UK. I think it was one of those things where, like many of you, we grew up in professional backgrounds. You kind of you're pushed to pursue it. Not so much, I luckily come from a family which has encouraged anything I do and has been really supportive. But obviously, for us, it was more give it a fair shot. So for me, a fair shot was I went and joined a law college in Bombay. It was good to begin with. And later on, I realized, okay, maybe I'm not achieving my full potential. Let me apply to the best there was in the UK, not expecting to get in, but more so that, when I look back, it would not be that I didn't do my best. And then kind of got there. Again, worked through that degree, never loved it, but then said, let me apply for the best job there is, kind of got that job as well. Very fortunate, worked hard for it. But then there came a point where I was like, okay, all we're doing is chasing. And I always say this, I think, people from the subcontinent, I know a lot of Sri Lankans now, I have a lot of Pakistani friends and obviously loads of family and friends in India. At least when I was growing up, I don't speak for Gen Z, but when I was growing up, it was very much, you don't look down, you don't look at your toes, but you don't look ahead either. You're looking at this for a 45-degree angle. And I feel in that sense, we're very blinkered because you're constantly looking at, okay, what is ahead? Let's run this rat race. And we're ambitious and we're very, competitive, many of us. And that's why we do so well in the world. But you're not really looking straight up. You're not saying, okay, what is the horizon and why am I running this race? And I think the minute I shifted focus from let's get the best law firm, let's get the best degree, let's kind of get the best job. And then I was like, okay, now it's not going to change much. This path is not going to change. It's on a straight line. Then I looked up and I said, that's not the goal I want. What is it that I want? And then I think one thing came resoundingly clear. It was, I love food. And at that point, I thought it's this love for food that's going to get me into kitchens and going to let me express myself through this medium. But I think today when I look back, it's more than food. I love people. And I love feeding people. I love interacting with people. I love making people, passionate about the same thing I am, allowing people to connect to a sense of nostalgia. And, luckily I found myself in here. But then there was lots of great things that aligned along the way. But yeah, I think eventually I kind of found myself in this world of food. But again, in hindsight, it all looks easy. At that point, it was very stressful. It was, it was nerve-wracking. I didn't know if it's the right decision. A lot of people said it isn't the right decision to leave a very lucrative job right at the beginning when the world was again my oyster in the legal field. to then say, look, I just want to, pursue a passion. And, I can't stress enough that you've got to be very privileged to make that choice as well. There are a lot of people out there who, for various reasons outside their control, can't do it. And I was very privileged, and I think that's why I want to kind of give back as much as possible as well. I think that's a long answer. I don't know if I've even answered your question, but let's just roll with this. And then I think more than anything else, I'd love to answer Q&As because this is, an interactive session.
Sure, sir. So we just few questions here and there, and then we will open the floor to the audience as well, where we'll be entertaining few questions from their end as well. So as you correctly mentioned regarding people following passion, people should do something that they like, and the same thing with what you did with switching from law altogether to a complete different field to the culinary industry. So because even a recent report, like a 2024 report, actually says that 50% of Gen Zs, the current generation, are willing to take a pay cut for a job that they are passionate about. In order to understand in much better terms, how can students turn their foodie dreams into career that's worth the trade-off? So they can actually earn from it, but they can also make a career in it, is what you are trying to understand.
Yeah. So I think, again, there's so many today, the world, because of social media and because of, general sort of AI is going to be the next big trend. Social media, I think, has shifted a lot. The traditional job market has changed humongously. And I think the next sort of 5 years is going to be a huge shift. And, you guys know this better than I do. You're far more clued in with AI and stuff than I am. But I feel that also lends itself many opportunities. Before the Industrial Revolution, I think everyone was really scared of industry, especially the older generations. They're like, they're going to take my jobs and they're going to take our livelihoods. But it's the people who adapted and said, okay, now I'm just going to learn how to use machines, are the ones who really succeeded. And I feel it's the same thing with AI. There's this huge fear-mongering right now about, oh my God, it's going to take jobs. Yes, it will take jobs in its traditional sense. But I think in that sense, you guys are so well placed at the inception where it's just part of your life. Whereas with me, especially my parents' generation, it's a huge mindset shift and they just can't get it. So yes, there will be a survival of the fittest. But I think what I'm trying to say is, back in the day, if I wanted to make a career from law to food, there was only two entries. One was to put money down and build my own restaurant and then sort of be the businessman behind it, which realistically would never have gotten me half as much money, would have been equal amounts of headaches and all that legal and commercial stuff that potentially I would have had to deal with as a lawyer, but would have been a lot more risk-free as a lawyer. But then there's a second side of things where, I could have been a chef. There was no course of being a sort of restaurateur. There was no course of being, front of house was not even a consideration. Whereas today, it's changed. You love food. You can express yourself through Instagram to begin with, which I started doing a lot more of. And it's allowed me a completely different routine, which I pursue simultaneously to my restaurants. You can do loads of supper clubs. And, the most powerful marketing tool is now in your control, whether it's via YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram. Back in the day, there was only traditional media or billboards or, newspapers and things like that. Whereas today you can control the narrative. Obviously, you've got to work hard. You've got to be savvy and you've got to be smart and create good content. But I think the content side has become so powerful that you can connect with people worldwide. You can become your best PR yourself. You don't need huge teams around you. And it's just that allows you to really pursue dreams and, make it your own, put your mark on it. You can even incrementally, grow on what's already done a lot faster than back in the day. Back in the day, evolution took a lot longer, whereas today I think it's just so fast that you come up with something, you add a little bit to it, and you can go in a completely different direction. So I feel the opportunities are huge for Gen Z. You guys are far more aware of them, and you can create them, whereas my generation and subsequent generations behind us just had it very different. So I encourage you to do it, but at the same time, I think that the problem you have as Gen Z, and I, deal with a lot of Gen Z, from my cousin who might be on the session to, to a lot of people we employ. You've got so many opportunities, so almost what clutters the brain, and then you also see the best bit of everyone else's life. So if you're a DJ and you want to, or if you're a budding DJ and you want to be a DJ, you're just looking at Avicii and you're looking at, the top guys who made it, and lots of other people in your generation who are like, okay, I want that instant success. If you're looking at being a content creator, it's a very short-lived life, that content creation. It can be lucrative, but for me, something that is dependent on a password and your whole income and your, not only income, but your whole sort of meaning and your whole, I guess your identity depends on a password or someone else's platform is very scary. I use it, but for me, Instagram is a billboard. It's to connect, but I never forget the real things, whether it's this kind of session, going out to cook live anywhere in the world, or building restaurants and writing books. For me, that bricks and mortar is very important. So I think that's something you guys got to remember. And I think it's something that I can't stress enough. So build this virtual world, but make sure you have your roots in the real world where, yes, you might lose a lot of your voice if your password or your account was hacked, but you don't lose your basis. You don't forget what you're about.
Very well, sir. So, sir, well, I.I.M.U.N here is trying to actually put the Gen Z, as you said, we actually have a lot of potential, but channel into right path can actually give us a lot of presence. Whereas, like the organization, apart from conducting leadership talks, doing student conferences, we also organize kind of educational tours, and we all are career specific. So I was like even fortunate enough in Bombay to be a part of one of their hospitality tour where we went to like different locations across Bombay, different entities, and there we got to meet the backend kitchen staff, like the head chefs, and try to understand how they are so closely integrated into hospitality industry. But while speaking to one of the head chefs there, we got to know that the culinary industry is not only known for its great food but for its great challenges. And including that, there's like high competition basis in margins, and now the evolving food trends, which are like the plant-based dining, which is coming into trend these days. So, what do you see the future of food business in the upcoming years?
Look, there's going to be an evolution in any business. Like I said, there'll be machines that take over certain aspects. There'll be, whether you're a lawyer today, I think AI is going to change a lot of things in the legal field, especially the way you start and grow, to food, right? So I think evolution is necessary. Evolution, you need to embrace evolution, but evolution is very different from trends.
Yeah.
I think, there's a mistake of chasing too many trends. I think in any business you do, and obviously I'll take food as an example, you first got to start off with doing something you genuinely love and know about. Now, I have a restaurant dear friend, and he's like, I'm so frustrated. I want to do something different. I want to come up with, a fried chicken model because these guys are doing so well. I said, how often do you eat fried chicken? And he's like, actually, I don't eat fried chicken. So I said, then why do you want to do it? Yes, it could be an easy model, but it's times like that you really need to center yourself and ask yourself. We've been through challenges. We've been through 2020. Before I opened Hoppers, I used to run a restaurant in Copenhagen, which was phenomenal, but I had to shut it. And that was never a success. It was something I picked up halfway through. We knew it was going to be a failure. I said not failure, but we knew it was wrong place, wrong time, fantastic restaurant. And seeing that close, being there for when I'm selling the furniture, selling the tandoor to a competition Indian restaurant has been one of the most humbling experiences. So I think that keeps me grounded, but knowing where your center is and knowing why you've done something, is very important. I think that will always guide you in the difficult times. If you start off with just trying to fill a gap or you think there's a bit of a need in the market, if you're not a consumer of your own product and a passionate consumer, if you are not the kind of person who would become your biggest, your biggest patron, then you should not do it, because you might even start off with success, but then the minute there's a challenge along the way, you're going to be lost. Whereas if you do something with that genuine, this is where passion plays a big role, and a genuine passion and something that you've tested and asked yourself. So today you come up with an idea that sounds amazing. Wait for a year before you act upon it. Don't just sit at home, but like sort of test it out, talk to people, because somewhere down the line, if you're not passionate enough, you're going to drop off. Because the other thing is, after that, once you started off, there will be challenges, and the easiest way to answer the challenge is if it comes from within, if the answer is innate to your personality. So, for instance, I started Hoppers, which is a very accessible restaurant. And for me, access is very, very important. It's probably my number one value. So if you come to me as a as someone who's never worked in restaurants before, a bit like myself, I will give you the opportunity somehow or the other. As long as you're willing to work hard, willing to sort of be humble and start at the ground, we will make the opportunity and you can rise as fast as you're capable of rising. You know, but so for me, that's very important from an access perspective. Same thing, I want people to be able to come and have, I know it sounds a lot sitting in Bombay, but it's still amongst the cheapest meals, but like a £15 meal in London, in central London, delivered with the best hospitality, best quality ingredients, by a team that cares in a lovely location, all the way up to about 55, 60 pounds. We don't go above that. You can't, even if you eat and drink enough, you won't be able to spend more than that. Whereas today, if you look at most London restaurants with everything that's happened post-COVID, you start at 50, 60 pounds. But for me, it's very important not to stay cheap, but to stay accessible. And by access, I mean, you could have the richest person walk in. All they want today is a dosa and chutney. They can have it. And because of that access, that remained a very fundamental value for me. And I wanted to make sure that that resounds through everything I do. Now, if someone came to me and said, look, actually with the same location, same team I have today, almost the same food, just putting it on a slightly nicer menu, maybe using silver instead of plate, stoneware, using a little bit of tablecloths, making the room fancier, spending a little bit more money on the room, I could be making 2.5 to 3 times more money off my site, right? But that would be like a Michelin-style fine dine restaurant. For me, that was not who I am. And, the minute there would have been competition or there would have been a challenge or someone gave me negative criticism, I would have lost my way. So today, I've gotten stronger and stronger with what I call my why, because I started off from the right place. And I think it's like sharpening a pencil. You start off with the right color and then you sharpen it along the way. It gets razor sharp. It gets like, pinpoint sharp by the end of it. And I think that's where you need to start off with. So this was my example. And today I'm so proud that although even in our group, we've got 2 Michelin star restaurants, we've got fantastic other dining options. For me as an individual, as a human being, I like going to places where I can chat to people, where I can have one dish, I can have 10 dishes. I can go in jeans, a hoodie and t-shirt. I don't need to dress up. I don't need to make a reservation. I don't need to, know someone to get a table. And for me, that's really important. And I think because of that, I have been able to answer some difficult questions along the way. And today we're stronger than we were 10 years ago when we started.
Got it, sir. So here, as we have already brought in the whole, like the term hoppers into picture, I am actually very much interested to know, like I just wanted to know more about it, because as you said, the hopper started from Copenhagen, then we started the business model again from Soho, like currently, so how hoppers went from one restaurant in Soho in 2015 to now like it's popular in like 3 buzzing spots in UK, and you've also received the Michelin with Gourmet in the first year itself. So what are the toughest challenges that you faced when establishing your restaurant, and how did you keep the flavors authentic?
Look, I mean, I'd be lying if I had a secret formula to this, because even, sometimes even today when I've thought about doing a second concept, I get shivers, because sometimes it spoils you also being very successful in your first one. This is my first one, but being successful in one restaurant spoils you because you're like, the bar has been set so high now, I need to do better next time. So I don't think, I'd be lying totally if I said the success is down to me. I think, you put your heart and soul into it. You surround yourself by the right people. You understand your strengths, but at the same time, more importantly, identify your own weaknesses and keep them to yourself if you like, but then you hire the right people to fill in those gaps. For us, loyalty is a core value. For me, more than anything else, loyalty and trust is the biggest thing. I've trained people from nothing to, being operational managers. I take a bet on my people, and I think that's really important. I think going back to how it started and why, so there was no real grand plan of opening multiple restaurants. We got a really nice site in Soho. Soho is a great area to start a restaurant, as anyone would say. So you need to know your area. We knew our food really well. It's food that we love eating. We wanted to eat. And then as time went by, as obviously the site came to reality, we went and did deep dive research. Soon, when we launched it, it was Sri Lankan and South Indian in the same breath. Media loved the word Sri Lankan because they'd seen Indian restaurants before. So before we knew it, we were suddenly seen as a Sri Lankan restaurant. Now, My closest ties to Sri Lanka were friends I had at university, who I was very close to when visited. But, I'll be fully honest, I had never visited Sri Lanka until the first time I went there was 2009 in summer. So a lot of my life I'd never been there. We only knew it as a sort of neighboring tiny little island, as from the Ramayan and also from cricket.
Yeah.
And we'd usually beat them. So that was it. And no, I never even dove deep into Sri Lankan food and stuff like that at that point. In fact, I used to eat a lot of Pakistani food and loved it. And obviously know all the regional Indian food. But when I went there, I fell in love with the people before the food. And then I got deeper and deeper into the food where I said, wow, this is so much like Kerala, but with Southeast Asian influences. And I came back with this thing of, yes, we want to do food, but there's good food in a lot of places. But more than food, I want to I'm so proud to be representing these amazing people. And it's a huge responsibility because, yes, in India, you'll have Indians running Italian restaurants, Japanese restaurants and everything. Whereas in a country like the UK, in a market like London or even New York in the States, very rarely is it that you find someone from one nationality representing another. Very rarely will you find a restaurateur who's successful in a cuisine that is not somehow there. They might be third, fourth generation Italian, but otherwise it isn't. And suddenly I found myself in this place. So I said, this is like, additional responsibility of now being very proud of this, but at the same time, I need to make sure I'm saying everything right, I'm researching the food right. So then took a deeper dive, and then that led to my cookbook, Hoppers, the Cookbook, which was 2022. And that's actually, my journey. It's a very personal journey, but obviously with how it ended up in Hoppers, a lot of the things that you don't see in Hoppers, the influences behind Hoppers, and obviously all the classics. So that book was a huge point to consolidate. And obviously now today I find myself having sort of moved on. We've inspired a lot of other new Sri Lankan chefs and restaurants. It's incredible to see that sort of snowballing. And I think I've also found myself I want to represent India a lot more. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to hide behind the Sri Lankan thing. I'm very proud to be, a mentor to Sri Lankans, chefs and restaurateurs. One amongst them, really have been embraced by the culture and the community. I have more friends in Colombo today I have in any other city in the world. And they've been so warm and amazing to me and my team. But I also want to make sure that people know Hoppers as a South Indian restaurant, equally know me as an Indian chef and restaurateur and cook and whatever else and writer. And that's why I'm doing a lot more in the Indian space.
Well, sir, when it comes to bringing people together, according to Indians, two things possibly could do so. One is food and the other is cricket. And here at I.I.M.U.N as well, we encourage students to have an international outlook while also embracing local cultures and tradition and staying true to your roots. So how do you balance staying true to Sri Lankan and Indian roots while making it a click for a global crowd there in the UK?
I think, again, it's one of those things that, we made it very personal. Our question behind every dish was, is it necessary on the menu and is it something we would want to eat? So if there's a dish we don't like, it's not because people are asking for it. Because again, people will stop asking and you won't know. So if you go with what someone else is doing and what there's a niche, obviously you've got to listen to your crowd. You've got to listen to your audience. You've got to take feedback on, and we're diligent about that stuff. But above all else, it needs to be seen through the feedback, the menu, the concept needs to be through your eyes. And it needs to have a very clear captain and a leader. And I think that's the important thing. My team is very close. We have no hierarchy. But my role is guiding that ship. So they will all come to me at the right time for the mentorship and for asking, okay, we've got these two directions. Both are equally interesting. Which one should we go on? And then you need to make sure that they trust you enough to go on that path and push you really further. So it's a collective effort, but with one person steering the ship. You can't get too democratic beyond the point. And I think in that sense, we always chose dishes that we liked, we enjoyed. I think there's a science to it as well. You want to make sure that there's something for as much. First, you got to identify your audience, and then you got to make sure there's something for that audience. You can't be everything to everyone. So there's that science of menu engineering. And then at the same time, like I said, I think in the beginning, it was just a menu that worked. We wanted to have spicy things. We wanted to have different meats on the menu. We wanted to have different vegetables on the menu. We wanted to have things that, from an operational point of view, if 9 out of your 10 dishes come from a fryer, that guy is going to be screwed. And the other section is going to be doing nothing. So from an operational point of view, when you devise a menu, you've got to, I almost take a highlight. I take 4 or 5 colors highlighters, and I go through my menu saying, okay, which section is this coming from? So you need to be operationally very savvy in that. Otherwise, there's going to be a bottleneck. But having done that, we kind of landed upon a menu that was, very well received. It was not humongous, but at the same time, it's not tight. Today, in fact, my biggest struggle is how do I make it smaller? But now we've got fans from edge to edge, so it's very hard to cut things. In fact, the fans live within our own team. So sometimes sitting with the team, I'm like, let's cut this dish. They're like, no, we can't do it. We're just not doing it. This is my favorite dish. So more than looking at what the guests are saying, I think we look at our own team first. But I think today then, as again, finding yourself sharpening that pencil, when I look back, I think I've now got a much clearer vision of, we've got certain dishes that fall into a Sri Lanka bucket. That's a 30-40% of our menu. 30% of our menu is probably purely Sri Lankan, in which case, we have tried to get the best ingredients. We've tried to get the best recipes, really fine-tuned them. So whether it's a black pork curry, whether it is a hopper, whether it's a sambal, whether it is one of the, like a devil dish, on a mutton roll, we have tried to make the best representation of these dishes, often, I'd say using good produce, sometimes even better than some stuff you get back in Sri Lanka. I'd say another 40 to 50% of our menu is more sort of South Indian, mainly Kerala, because a lot of my team is from there, but some Tamil influences. And that's again authentic because these guys come from there and they're very good at what they do. And we try and sort of, obviously, the process is you get them to cook a dish they're comfortable with. You then fine tune that dish and then you set the recipe and it's consistent. But then there's about 20-30% of those dishes which have just evolved. So whether we went off and did a little collaboration with someone, learned something new, said, wow, this is a great dish. Over time, we could bring it onto our menu after lots of trial and testing, and now it's just become a classic. So whether that's something like our bone marrow dish, which was pre-opening, we kind of, we were doing a little bit of what you call in India jugalbandi, which we call the 2-3 chefs messing around in the kitchen and coming up with a dish based on traditional stuff. And that dish worked really well. And today it's probably our biggest seller and most popular dish. The second dish was, we have a mussel dish, which is delicious. And we do a mussel in a hoti. Today you see other restaurants doing it and calling it authentic, but I don't think I've ever seen that dish anywhere else in the world. So things like that have evolved over time. Our chili cheese dosa, it's just something I used to eat as a kid. Obviously, I'm not saying I created the chili dosa, but with this recipe, we have done, like, we've got a podi in there, we've got a mix of cheeses, and we've got green chilies. So it's a chili cheese dosa like even I have not eaten in India. And I've got Indian friends who come first thing, want to sit at Hoppers, eat a chili cheese dosa, straight off the flight. So dishes like those, they're not fusion. They're not trying too hard. We naturally came upon them. It was a long process of evolution. And they now sit on our menu in this bucket, which is, firmly a Hopper's bucket, which is inspired by various regions, but not really from any of them.
Well, sir, you've also said that Hoppers was actually a very selfish motive for you to eat what you love. So what's the wildest dish you've dreamed up and what's the story behind it?
I think it's pretty much, I already mentioned it in my last answer. I think we've got quite a few. Chili cheese dosa is definitely one. That was a later creation. We weren't gutsy enough to have it on our menu in the beginning because, messing with the dosa is big and we didn't want to do it early on. So it came later. Our bone marrow varuval is like a really lovely South Indian Kerala style gravy. Chef had made, Ranjit, he's like a brother to me. He's our exec chef. He started off as a junior chef and today he runs the whole place. He was creating a bunch of dishes. Another chef was working with rotis and the third chef was doing something with roasted bone marrow. We were eating all three of them together. Suddenly he said, let's try them together. Next day, third day, fourth day, 4 days of trial. Later, we had this amazing dish of slit bone marrow piece. It was actually lamb bone marrow in the beginning. Now it's beef that was simmered in this curry sauce that just lent itself perfectly to it and loaded on top of a bread and on a Malabar paratha. And it's done really well. So that was, I'd say, one of the best dishes and, most fun stories. But then equally, there was a day when I cooked a whole goat in Regent's Park on a live fire using this Jaffna spice rub. We had created American barbecue technique. That turned turned out to be an incredible dish. We collected all the drippings and made a curry sauce of it. So then we kind of brought that dish back to the restaurant in certain, in a sort of context. We do that as a special from time to time. Obviously not the whole animal, but it's more sort of, it's smaller.
Nice. So, all the dishes which you have mentioned right now are really making my mouth feel watery. And I'm a big fan of non-vegetarian food, so everything that you're saying is I'm imagining those dishes in front of me, and they're like, what if I tasted and how they would taste like, and how my experience would be. Coming back to Hoppers again, the restaurant's name Hoppers is actually after a traditional dish from Sri Lanka. For those unfamiliar, could you explain what a hopper is and why did you decide to name your restaurant after that dish?
So the simplest sort of answer to that is a hopper is very similar to an appam, and I'm going to use the word similar. We get into lots of fights about this because you'll have lots of Keralans on post saying, this is the appam. It is derived from the appam. I think the word was sort of, it was the origin as far as I studied, it was like appa. Then the British couldn't say it, so they sort of made appa into hopper, and then hopper just stayed on. And funny enough, the Sri Lankans actually refer, just like the Sri Lankans call their curries. But they have a red curry, they have a black pork curry, they actually call it curry. And they've got curry powders, whereas in India you don't have curry powders. You've got masalas, various masalas for different things, and we don't call our curries apart from Gujaratis who call it curry sometimes, but there's nothing else that's called a curry in that sense. The hopper is quite different because the pan firstly is different from the one used in both Tamil Nadu and in Kerala. We use the heavier iron pan, so it lends to a softer, more shallow kind of appam. The batter is pretty much the same, but again, even in Sri Lanka, you've got variations of the batter. Sri Lanka, they use an aluminium, deeper pan, so it's crispy on the edges, softer in the middle. So it is a different shape, different texture, much for muchness, but it is a different dish. So we represent very clearly the Sri Lankan style of hopper, not the appam. I love appams as well, and I grew up eating appams and stews, so this was a very interesting shift. Whereas on the other hand, our dosas are not like the thosai, which they have in North Sri Lanka and Jaffna particularly, which are the thicker, bit like kal dosas in India. We have a very traditional Tamil Nadu style dosa, which is the crispier dosa, or the sort of Karnataka style. Not even the Karnataka, ours is more the Tamil style dosa, so it's like crispier dosa. So that's where again we are very we know very clearly where we stand with our various dishes. Now, why the name? It was a working title. We always referred to this concept that we had created as a sort of Sri Lankan South Indian as hoppers. And then we said we'll come up with a name at the right time. And then the next thing you know is that, restaurant's almost open. And we felt the name works. It's single word. It is something that the British can say easily. The surname over here. So there's an element of, for Sri Lankan, there's an element of knowledge and like, wow, I know what this is and let's go and check it out. So very clearly Sri Lankan, it's a term they use all the time, food they're obsessed with. For a Westerner, there's a sense of intrigue, but at the same sense of, it's not like a random word they've never heard of or full of phonetics that they can't pronounce. But so people could, can sort of pronounce it, come in there. Obviously, we shot ourselves in the foot because now it just meant that every person who walks in wants to order a hopper. It's like imagine naming an Indian restaurant Naan. And then before anyone even looks at the curries or starters and all that, they're like, oh, we want to eat a naan, maybe we'll get a curry to share. Like, business model doesn't work. And also your tandoor is going to get slammed. So in our first few days, we had the hopper section completely killed. And it's a funny story because, in our second week, we were so busy. There was only one guy who could make hoppers the way they were demanded, very quickly. And it took about 4 minutes to make this big hopper. We do the biggest ones you can find. And this guy went on leave one day because he had to pick up his daughter from school. Lunch service, we were packed. We had a long queue outside, 40 seats in the room. Doesn't sound like much now, but that time it was 40 tables. Everyone wants a hopper, obviously. And suddenly the pan starts sticking because there's another guy who's not made them before. This is our second week. The batter is like little over fermented, starts sticking to the pan. It's too much sugar in it. And we don't know what to do now. To re-season this pan and to cook it again would be about 5-7 minutes, would be 10 minutes. Then 5 minutes on top, 15 minutes gone. And that time, average Turn time was about 45 minutes. People be in and out. Lunchtime even quicker. So now we're all thinking, what do we do? So we literally went to a few people like, would you like a dosa? Would you like roti? And said, no, we want a hopper. We got to a point where we just served everyone dosas and we told them this is a hopper. And luckily no one even knew the difference because obviously hopper was a brand new thing then. So we went over and served all these guys dosas saying this is the hopper. They went away very happy they've tried this new hopper. Because in this market no one knew what it was to begin with. And it was the way around. Then obviously we learned, we called that guy back. He was there in every service since. And today we've got a whole team of people who can make them with the eyes shut.
Well, quite an interesting story. People like altogether managing a crisis, but people not knowing what an action offer is and they taking in those as but they are
Till today, 10 years on, we still have, I'd say 50% of our guests come in and they don't know what an hopper is. So there's a huge market here. We're very fortunate. We still cater to a lot of people coming in for the first time. So it's still quite interesting.
Well, actually, restaurants such as us not only tell you about dishes, but they actually take you to the unexplored part of the culture and unexplored part of the diversity which comes from our country. And when it comes to what I say, even Indian food these days, you just go through social media, you speak to people who aren't from this country. Two things that they remember is like naan and butter chicken. After which, they don't understand what the Indian cuisine actually holds. And curry is just a common term which are put to everything, which doesn't exist here at all because you go to each and every dish that is prepared in an Indian household, and they will have different spice bases altogether.
Totally agree with you. Yeah.
So now, actually, we're coming towards the end of the session, and I have this rapid fire round prepared for you, where I just put a word in front of you, whatever comes into your mind, the first thing, you have to say that. So, starting with it, favorite childhood dish.
Dosa?
Okay. Spicy or mild?
Spicy.
Biggest kitchen pet peeve?
A mess.
Okay.
As tidy as you go is probably the one difference between an amateur chef and a professional. It's just it takes no time to pile up. You start putting dirty things in the sink. It takes no time. Just wash it, move on, and you just see your brain is cleaner. Things are more organized.
It's like whenever we try putting something into our kitchen because we all are immature cooks and our mothers are always around us trying to say, like, please keep it clean, please keep it clean. It's my kitchen. Don't create a disaster where you it's like. Yeah. Hoppers.
Family.
Dream dinner guest.
Bruce Springsteen.
Okay. Must have spice in your kitchen.
Sorry?
Must have spice in your kitchen.
Must have spice. I'd say asafoetida, hing. I always talk about it as like the magic, the sort of stock cube of Indian food. It's a secret behind a lot of our small pinch changes the whole thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Now speaking about the organization I.I.M.U.N.
Speaking of
the organization I.I.M.U.N.
I.I.M.U.N. I always remember school because they used to be like, I was in a school called Cathedral in Bombay and they used to have a C.M.U.N. and then obviously participate in the I.I.M.U.N. as well. So I think opportunity.
Fortunately.
Network.
India.
Home.
And last, youth.
Again, unbound opportunity. There's just, you don't realize it and you're chasing dreams. And then later on when you realize that actually the amount of time I had, no obligations, nothing holding me back. Don't worry so much about when, you're going to be making those millions or when you're going to be this thing. Because when you make that, you wish you had some of that time again. When you make it, so just explore as much as you can, do as much as you can. Now things will settle down and you will get there eventually.
So like during a conversation, there was one question which came up during the session in between, which I've taken a note of, where one of our audience member they asked that Hoppers celebrates the Sri Lankan food. So how do you connect this cuisine with the Indian sensibilities and the storytelling?
I think, again, we were very firm from the beginning. It was very much, a celebration of India and South India. So if you ask me, my cookbook, for example, is purely Sri Lanka. It's my journey in Sri Lanka. It's the learnings from Sri Lanka. It's the people who've inspired us, stories of them, recipes, and how we brought that back to Hoppers. Whereas Hoppers is very much South India and Sri Lanka. And I think the kind of cuisines have a lot of interlap. There's a lot of overlap, but there's a lot of interwoven sort of cross culture. Whether it's sort of north, which is Tamil Nadu, the Tamil, ethnicity, food from there that came to the north of Sri Lanka, but also a lot of Sinhalese food is inspired by Kerala food. So historically, it was a lot of Kerala food, and then you kind of saw the Malay influences, the Moor influences, the burger influences coming in from the different colonization. So I don't think, I actually think it's really beautiful to be able to represent both these in one breath. We don't go beyond the food. So for me, it's very clear that our restaurant is about representing food with some sort of immersive elements in there, things that caught our eye, pure design. We don't celebrate, we tend to stay, we are fully apolitical, we are agnostic when it comes to sort of any religion. We celebrate it all, but we don't then go off and celebrate religious functions specifically. If there's something to do, like Ramadan, for example, has such a close link to food. And people are eating incredible food. I love traveling around, that part of the world in Ramadan, because the kind of food you get late at night is incredible. So for us, we did a Ramadan menu because a lot of our guests are, holding the fast and they want to come in the evening. And even then, we didn't call it a Ramadan menu. We call it a biryani banquet because we want to be religiously sort of, completely unbiased. And it wasn't for anyone celebrating or not, Muslim, not. It was for everyone. So I think that's something that is very core to our culture, and we celebrate food and nothing else.
There's actually very
Yeah. So I think in that sense, it's very easy to do it. We just take the stuff that we love. There's coconut curry leaves, mustard seeds in both the cuisines. There's curry powder in Sri Lanka. There's certain other things in South India, and we make it work.
Well, it actually much more resonates with the organization and its ideology, where we try to stay apolitical, taking good from every part, and then providing it to the students as well.
Yeah.
So, sir, here, concluding the session, after this discussion, we have understood one thing, that great food isn't just about taste, it's about storytelling, culture, and connection. And so your journey proves that passion and adaptability can take you places even if your starting point is a courtroom instead of a kitchen. And so your ability to blend heritage with innovation is an inspiration to aspiring culinary entrepreneurs, reminding us that the best ideas often come from the unexpected places. Chef Karan, thank you for sharing your incredible journey with us, for pushing boundaries in the food world, and for showing us that a great meal is an experience, not just a dish. We can't wait to see what's next for you and the